call this meeting to order. As we do not have a quorum, which our bylaws say there must be 2 from each side, 2 from the school and 2 from the city. We're missing 1 member. So we will still have the presentations, but we will suspend the minutes to the next meeting where we will have a quorum to get them adopted. So just hold on to your minutes till the next meeting. But with that, I have this beautiful little note that Denise put together for me. We still would like to have an official roll call, so would you do that, Angela?
Barb Beyer. Here. James Michael Bowers.
Excused?
Kathy Danick.
Here?
Lyrian Gaylor-Baird.
Here.
Piyush Srivastava.
Present.
Brody Weber.
Excused? Already suspended with item 3. Is there anyone here who wants to do public comment on anything listed on this agenda? Seeing none?
Madam Chair, I just, items not listed on the agenda.
Sorry, not listed. There's still no one here. We're still good. It's been a long morning already. We are to item 5 on our agenda. Our item 5 is the report regarding the Community Learning Center initiative. This is our proactive programming of our Safe and Successful Kid Interlocal. If you remember, last time we had the SRO report, and we had the social worker report. So this is the 3rd in the series. And I will turn this over to Nola Derby Bennett, who is joined by Matt Larson, Ryan Zabawa, Joe Wright, and Rob McIntyre from LPS. Go for it.
Well, we're going to take it away. So I'm going to go over our annual report for community learning centers. I want to point out that this report covers last school year. So these are data that come from our previous school year. As always, I like to acknowledge our leadership team. We have grown over the past 7 years. When I came into this position, we had a pretty skeleton crew, and as we've been able to implement funding that has come from Safe and Successful Kids Interlocal, as well as other funds that we've been able to leverage. As a result of that partnership, we have been able to expand our leadership team pretty substantially. We've been able to add additional curriculum specialists, and then in partnership with Prosper Lincoln, we've also been able to add a couple of community builders. And then we also have a dedicated full-time family and neighborhood engagement specialist. So we don't do this work alone. We have lots of really great people on our team who help us out with this, with all of this work. So I like to start out with celebrations. And one of the most exciting celebrations that we had this year is honestly directly as a result of the investment in the CLC leadership team. And really the focus being placed on expanding our family and neighborhood engagement. And so at the NeighborWorks Lincoln, their annual meeting this last year, the Belmont School Neighborhood Advisory Committee received the 2023 Spirit of Lincoln Neighborhoods Award. So one of the things that our community builders do is really work with all of our communities and all of our school neighborhoods to try to build up that School Neighborhood Advisory Committee. And the Belmont SNAC was recognized this last year as being a really involved and well-coordinated school neighborhood advisory committee that's a really engaged campus, and they've really been doing some amazing things. Matter of fact, right now they're working on a strategic plan for their campus. So that's one school neighborhood advisory committee that has taken that work and really run with it. One of the exciting things about community building is that we get to kind of bring all the people together and then let them lead their neighborhood, and so that's been really fun to be a part of and to watch them take over and to have some voice in their own community and their own neighborhood. So community learning centers have sort of 3 pillars of the work that we do. We focus on successful students, we focus on thriving families, and we focus on strong neighborhoods. At all of our sites, every single year, each site creates an annual plan, and it's focused around our rubrics, our quality rubric standards, and each one of our sites creates that at their leadership team level and then implements that annual plan throughout the year, identifying measures, identifying goals, and also successes that they want to build on. So from our leadership team in my office, our family and neighborhood engagement team and our curriculum team also create annual plans. We know that we also have goals that we need to achieve each year, and so we put those in writing and we check in with each other. And so our community team's annual plan sort of focused on 5 key areas. They focused on professional development, making sure that we are supporting not only the team at our level, at our leadership level, but also the teams at each one of the schools. So they both attend professional development as well as facilitate professional development within our communities and our sites. They also advise and coach on the school neighborhood advisory committees. We have 2 community builders. One of them serves the east side of Lincoln and one of them serves the west. So you can see the breakdown there of the 30 schools that each of them divide up east and west. Both of our community builders have individual projects that they work on, but they also cross over and work collaboratively together. So one of our community builders has been very focused on being involved in developing the new downtown skate park. One of our community builders has been working really hard on creating a sports equity focus within the community learning centers. They work together on a project that's in Northeast Lincoln called Project Walk Together. It will be the 3rd year this year of doing that program. And then they also focus on a program called Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World, which is facilitated by the Food Bank, and it's a financial literacy program. So they all have different focus areas, but then they also have things where they come together. They also have some multi-school partnerships, so they're working with family literacy at many of our CLC schools, working with EmployLink and with student advocates. And then additionally, they support our site self-assessments. So if our sites have questions regarding family and neighborhood engagement related to their self-assessments, that the community builders do coaching to help with those things. And then our curriculum team created their annual plan as well. They aligned their annual plan they overlapped the All Means All action plan with the conditions for success from the CLC rubrics. So they wanted to make sure that everything that they were doing aligned both with our rubrics and aligned with LPS's All Means All action plan. So in the blue, you'll see the language from our rubrics, and in the red, how it aligns to the All Means All action plan. So they focused on programming and particularly around getting students involved. So we know that higher graduation rates result from students being in school and being engaged at school. And so we've had some initiatives focused on creating opportunities that maybe didn't already exist to engage students who maybe didn't necessarily engage much with any extracurriculars at school. Related to responsiveness to need, we really looked at transition times. So thinking about students transitioning either into school from pre-K into kindergarten, and programs that align with that would be things like Jumpstart to Kindergarten. We also focus on transitioning between schools, whether a student is leaving one elementary and going to another one. We want to make sure that that's a successful transition, and the supports that they're leaving at one school, they can get plugged into at another. And then also transitions between grade levels. So if we're transitioning from elementary to middle or middle to high school, we have programming that takes place usually over the summer to help ease some of those transition times. We also focused on professional development. We've really leaned in this year in partnership with student services and our special education teams on helping our CLC staff to understand restorative practices and be able to implement the same behavior management strategies that are used during the school day. We know that students are more successful if they understand the expectations, and if our expectations after school don't align with what happens during the day, it creates chaos. So we needed to align those things, and we've done a lot of professional development around making sure that not only are the school community coordinators well trained in those practices, but also that they have the ability to teach their staff. Again, with quality programming, really focusing on making sure that we are providing all kinds of programming that lead to positive numbers and graduation rates. And then we're constantly evaluating. So with everything that we do, with every new strategy that we implement, we want to make sure that it's useful and that it's doing what we thought that it would do when we implement. And so we have some really great partners who we get to work with in the evaluation team who help us to measure those those areas. So we're going to look a little bit at data. I want to let you know that once again this year, we don't have statewide testing data, but I'm hopeful that next year's report will at least be able to introduce a new baseline of data that we can share and maybe be able to start to do some comparisons and measurements going forward. So what you have is a comparison of enrollment for last year and then this year. We didn't go back any further than last year because we felt like the pandemic impacted our enrollment numbers so much that we didn't feel like that was a fair comparison. But between last year and this year, the number that I particularly think is important and that we want to point out is that 15 to 44 hours column. The feds tell us that 30 hours or more identifies as regular attendance. It used to be 30 days, now it's 30 hours, and that's significant because we can package those hours together. So if a student comes a half hour one day, 15 minutes the next day, and then 15 minutes the next, they are getting some CLC programming, and just at a different dosage than we used to be able to only measure if they attended a full hour. So we know that there's impact even if it's done in smaller bits and doses. So those numbers at that 15 to 44 hours and higher are greater generally than the numbers of the previous year. So we are still dealing with staffing challenges. Our partners are still struggling to get part-time staff, and so we do still see numbers that are a little bit lower than they were pre-pandemic, and we think part of it is because staffing is lower. And then I would say the other thing that we think really impacts our numbers and that causes them to look a little bit lower than they were pre-pandemic is the change in the way that people work. And so more people are working from home, which means that they don't necessarily see a need for their kids to stay after school because they're at home and can have their kids come home after school. And so one of the things that we've kind of focused on and know that we need to do better at is informing families of the value of CLC programming, even if they're at home and can supervise their kids once they get home from school. We still want them to stay and take part in all of the amazing activities that we are able to offer. So we know that messaging needs to change to encourage people to have their kids attend, even though they might not necessarily need to, engage in CLC because they're still thinking of it as childcare, which they don't necessarily need after school anymore. And then on the bottom table is really just a comparison of the CLC attenders compared to our district averages. Of course, all of our numbers for free reduced lunch students, multilingual learners, students who fall in racial and ethnic diverse categories, and who are verified for special education are just a little bit higher than our district as a whole. And then here's just another look at free reduced lunch numbers for CLC schools, and then students who attend CLC programming as compared to the school district as a whole. So one of the things that is required of us as an organization that's funded by 21st Century Nebraska Department of Education funding is that we administer annual surveys. And so we survey lots of different groups. We survey teachers, we survey students, we survey their parents, we survey our community partners. We pretty much survey anybody who has any involvement in CLCs at any level. But one of the surveys that's particularly important is the classroom teacher survey. And the reason why it's important is because these are the only results related to this 21st century funding that get reported to Congress. And so in our district this last year, if a student attends a CLC 10 hours or more, they automatically receive a survey. Teachers automatically receive a survey for that student. So not the 30-hour regular attender. Anybody who gets who attends 10 hours or more automatically goes on the list for surveys. We compile that list of survey recipients at the end of first semester, and then the survey window is March through the end of April. So we're coming up on survey window right now. We aim for 100% survey return rate on teacher surveys. Last year, we got 88%, which is pretty good. We still have a ways to go, but we feel pretty good about that survey return rate number. There's a couple of caveats to the survey return rate. One of the things is that sometimes a student will move from one building to another. Sometimes at semester, that's a pretty common move time. And so by the time the rosters are submitted, we miss that, that a student has potentially moved. So sometimes we send a survey to a school where the student no longer attends, and that survey is thrown out. And then additionally, if a teacher starts a survey but doesn't complete the whole thing, that is also counted as a zero return. So those are some of the reasons why we think we probably got better survey return, but some of those are surveys that got thrown out. So each school gets a report that's specific to their school about their teacher survey results. At the 9 through 12 level, our survey results are much lower, at 45% compared to 88 at the high school or at the elementary school level. One of the reasons why we think that might be difficult is because we can only survey one teacher. So for each student, the survey only goes to one teacher. It covers lots of different subjects, but it only goes to one teacher. So we have to identify which teacher we think is the right teacher to send that to. It was always going to be a first semester teacher, but during second semester when the survey actually happens, that teacher may not have that student anymore in their class. They also might be a teacher of a subject that they don't feel comfortable to answer about other subjects that student might be studying. And so if they only answer part of the survey, the whole thing gets thrown out. So it's not a great system. And we have we've given some feedback to UNMC, who administers that survey, about why we feel like those high school surveys could use some adjustment. So we're hopeful that as we continue to tweak and address some of the challenges with the survey administration, we will look at better survey results coming back from the high school level as well. Like I said, parents also receive surveys. It's a scale of 1 to 4. So we compare our survey results to the statewide results, and we like for those numbers to be pretty close. We definitely always look at survey results that are under a 3.0. And the one that I have circled on here, I'll point out to you in a second why I think this is significant. The survey item is, my child enjoys the activities offered at the school. And so the parents said, yeah, maybe. And then when we look at our elementary student return rate, the second row there says, I enjoy coming to programming most of the time. And if students said yes or sometimes, that number is 96%. So parents may think that their kids maybe are a little bit complaining about having to stay after school, but the kids are telling us that once they're there, they enjoy being there. So on our student surveys, we really look at the no's. So we want those no's to be very low, and we like for them to be somewhat similar to the statewide numbers, which they basically are. Yes, ma'am.
What is the analog statewide? What are we comparing Lincoln's CLCs to? Survey. Is it CLCs throughout the state?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So I think there's like about almost 200 CLC programs across the state. So every program is its own number. So in Lincoln we have 30. So we are not just one number, we're 30. So obviously Lincoln and Omaha skew those results pretty significantly because Omaha has about 35 CLCs as well. But then they're spread all throughout the rest of the state. That's a great question.
I have a clarification question
Sure.
too. When we were talking about number of hours and different columns, they are over what period?
Over the year.
Over the year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
thank you.
over the school year. And we
Okay.
don't look at summer, and we also don't look at morning programming. I think that's important to point out. So it's just after school attendance. Thank you. And then our 3rd through 5th graders, the number that stood out to us here, we always look at numbers that are under 3.0, even though it's really similar to the statewide number, is the mastery orientation area. And so one of the bits of feedback that we've given to UNMC about these questions is that maybe the questions are a little bit confusing, particularly for a 3rd through 5th grader. So the example question here is, I do my schoolwork because I'm interested in it. So a student could interpret that question in lots of different ways, right? They could say, I don't do my schoolwork. They could say, I do my schoolwork, but I'm not interested in it. They could say, I do my schoolwork, but not because I'm interested in it, but there's a different motivation there. So it's like, it's not that great of a question because I think it can be interpreted in lots of different ways. So we, give that same feedback to our partners who are professionals in writing survey questions, but maybe are not thinking about it from a 3rd through 5th grade brain. And then at the secondary level, these results are only for 6th through 8th graders. Our high school students take a different survey completely. And we don't get those results because we asked for a different survey for our high school students, and they take the survey, but then those results are not reported to us for the high school students. It's because we asked for a different survey than what they give the 6th through 8th graders, but we asked for that different survey because we don't feel like the survey is reflective of how our high school students see their CLC programming. So again, we had one area that was under 3, and it's higher than the statewide average. So looking forward, we are operating on a strategic plan that was created in 2015, and we had intended to redo our strategic plan in the 2020 year, and then that sort of fell apart. And so we are now in the process of rewriting our strategic plan. We are doing that in partnership with our regional director from the Coalition for Community Schools. So we have contracted with the coalition. We have a regional director who lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and who works with all of the Midwest community schools in our region. And so he is helping to facilitate our strategic planning process. One of the things that really makes that partnership important is because we're able to get a national perspective on community schools across the nation and compare what we're doing here in Lincoln, where our efforts are, and maybe what we need to be considering as we continue to be a leader in community schools implementation through our school district. And so it's been really interesting to hear from different community stakeholder groups about the things that we're successful in and the areas that we need to look at, and then compare that to other models across the nation and consider adjustments. So we have been doing lots of different work groups. We continue to have additional visits from Ryan is his name, and he will be coming again, I think, at the end of March to hold listening sessions with different stakeholder groups. And then we will work to align or to compile all of our data, and we will be rolling out that new strategic plan for the next school year. So we know that we want our strategic plan to be aligned with the LPS strategic plan as well, which was just announced. And so as we are kind of sifting through early results, one of the, our data is lining right up. So not intentional, but that sure worked. And then I just wanted to throw in the image of our budget. I always think that this is a really important piece to look at for us because we have such a braided funding source. We have lots of different inputs to our budget, and of course, all of our lead agencies also contribute at a very high level. So we continue to appreciate the partnerships that our 10 lead agencies bring to the table and their leadership in terms of continuing this work going forward. Happy to answer questions.
Questions? Barb?
Where does the in-kind usually come from?
That's a great question. Most of the in-kind is LPS. So what it really is snacks and it's space. So none of our community partners pay for any of the space that they use to implement CLCs at our schools. That is all donated in-kind by the district.
Okay.
Yush, any questions?
Curious about how are these surveys administered, especially from K to 2nd grade and 3rd to 5th grade? Explain the process, how that kind of takes place?
Sure. So we can have students complete a survey on a tablet or paper. We can have them do paper surveys. The K through two surveys, I think, are just numbers or maybe even a smiley face, and then smiley face, sad face, just calm face, and then 3rd through 5th is the same way. We do them on tablets, or they have a paper survey that then we enter.
So is there an adult kind of helping them, explain what the question means?
Yes,
and-
an adult will read the questions to them, but will not lead them in any kind of way in terms of how they answer the question, just provide examples of this is what this means, this is what this would mean.
Yeah.
So
And is that pretty consistent statewide as far
Yes.
as how it's implemented?
yes, yep.
Okay.
And then as far as like the teacher surveys and parent surveys, those are emailed, and so there is a translation available. So if there's families that for whom English is not their first language, they can access a survey that's translated.
Another question I have is, I noticed that when we were talking about the teacher surveys, there was an extra question for the 9th through 12th grade teachers. They were asked about the level of family engagement in students' learning, and that question was not asked in K through 8th. Was there a particular reason for that?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. It's something that I could go back and ask our partners at UNMC and figure out why that question isn't answered at that level.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Piyush. Mayor?
Thank you so much for the presentation, for all the work that you and your teams across the city do, and the schools and the CLCs. Just looking back on the slide where you talk about sort of what healthy students or successful students kind of look like. This survey seems largely focused on academics. Is there more to it than that? Are there also aspects that are focused on optimism, hope for the future, or I know LPS does collect other data on physical health. How are other data sets potentially evaluated or connected to CLCs, or can they be?
Yeah, they can be, and we haven't included those this time around because we're still dealing with some of those things not being implemented during the aftermath of pandemic. So we do plan next year to include like the PACER data again, which is data that we used to report on but haven't for several years. And so we will be able to include those going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So the snack committees have kind of evolved over what they started at 25 years ago, which it's really hard to say that this is a quarter of a century old, but 25 years. Talk about the difference in the snack committee and what it means to keeping the CLCs engaged in their neighborhood.
Yeah. So, parent engagement is always something that we strive for, and we want parents to feel like they are welcome and their voices are welcome at community learning centers, and frankly, at all of our schools. So some schools have just a higher rate of parent engagement for a variety of different reasons. A lot of that has to do with when meetings are held, how accessible those meetings are. We serve a lot of schools that have students and families who don't have English as their first language, and so we need to make sure that those meetings are accessible to people, even if it's being facilitated by a person whose primary language is English. So we need to have interpreters at those meetings. And so we've really focused on making sure that we're reducing all of the barriers. One of our school neighborhood advisory committee meetings takes place at McPhee. Their meeting takes place at school drop-off because they have a lot of third shift workers, and that's or second and third shift workers. So after school meetings or evening meetings are impossible for them to attend because they're at work. And so we do their meeting first thing in the morning at the school because that's when they're available. So it's taking the time to dig in and figure out what are the barriers and how can we reduce those barriers. And then it's creating it's having a meeting that's not just a report about what's happening at the school or identifying certain goals that the school wants to work on. It's looking at this data and saying, what's our community telling us? How are our students doing? What areas do we need to work on? And, truly listening for feedback from families about what their challenges are and what the assets are that they're bringing to the table that they can, include and make the school a better place. So it's sort of opening up that discussion. It goes from family involvement to family engagement. And that's really what we've been focusing on, is that engagement piece, and not just having parents that we can say, yep, we had 15 people attend that meeting, but like, what did we do, and how rich was the discussion, and how engaged are the parents? That's what we want to focus on.
That's a huge difference than what it was 20 plus years ago.
Yep.
And it's really nice to see that parent involvement carrying through from the parent involvement within the classroom all the way to the after-school program. So thank you for making those changes.
Yeah.
I have a couple more little observations. Okay. When you talked about the change in work status environments for parents, and that made a huge difference, is there an opportunity here to engage children and their families because we move away from the idea that it's just daycare?
Yes, so I think one of the things that's really important is to ask students and their families, what are your kids interested in? So not just putting together a schedule that mirrors first quarter schedule last year, we do the exact same thing this year. We have a whole different set of kids, right? So every year we need to be asking our students and their families, what are you into? Or what are your kids into? And then going and finding those community partners in our community who can help us to deliver that kind of programming. So, we could just dream, much like the survey questions, actually, not thinking about it in the terms of the kid brain, right? But like, oh, these are things that adults think kids might be interested in. We totally shouldn't do that. We had a really great school community coordinator at one of our schools who did that survey for all of their the whole building. Increase their attendance in CLC programming by like 45% because they started offering clubs that kids liked. Mm-hmm. And one of those was a Pokemon club, which was facilitated by the principal because we couldn't find a community member who knew anything about Pokemon. And so the principal took it on as like I can learn alongside the kids because the kids really want this. And we don't know anybody who knows anything about Pokemon. So that was just one club that kept kids there. And then they also maybe got a little dose of, the soccer club as well. So now they're involved in some physical activity after school. Then they started, maybe participating in like the movie critic club, which is a super cool club where they get to watch movies, but we're tricking them by then having them write critique of the movie. And so now all of a sudden we're looking at literacy. So they like to watch movies, but we can embed a little bit more than that.
It's fun.
It
Learning
can be.
fun. So I'm looking at a couple more here. High school, they only want to be involved with what high school wants to do, but I've heard these are pretty rich programs with the kids that are active. So talk a little about high school. So
Lincoln High and Northeast High School have actually started a really cool new experience for their high school students called the New American Leadership Academy. NALA is the acronym for that. And it's all students who are not native to the United States as of their birth. And they are developing leadership and advocacy skills within their schools. They're working with other students who come from similar backgrounds. They have opportunities to connect with elected officials and lawmakers and look at, and to provide feedback on their experience as a new American student within our school district, but also within our community. And so that's one club that was created because students came to us and said, hey, we don't have a space. Can you help us to create a space at the high school level? So we get that kind of really rich experience. And then one of our most popular clubs at high school is Dungeons and Dragons Club. So again, maybe students who aren't necessarily involved in formalized extracurricular activities at the school, but now we have created a space for them to feel like they are part of the Rockets Dungeons and Dragons Club or, the Lynx Dungeons and Dragons Club. The other really popular high school club is esports, which is becoming even a national trend and is becoming sanctioned at the collegiate level. So again, creating opportunities and experiences that kids could potentially get a scholarship to go to college and be on the esports team. So, you know, it looks a little different at the high school level, but again, we want to be really responsive to kids telling us what it is that they want to do and then creating that space for them.
And turning it into a learning opportunity that they don't know they're learning in.
Right, and they're going to go play video games somewhere else. They might as well be doing it at school.
And you
So
can watch which
it's a
video
good, safe
games.
place for them to be.
And the last thing is you talked about your budget, and because I've been around since dirt was created, the reality is the budget when it started was very finite.
Yes.
And now you called it braided funding. Now you have to put it in a pie chart. So it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and yet the investment from the community seems to get broader and broader. So I just want to commend you on that budget growth, and keeping the community partners active and engaged. The CLCs are a big part of our student success, and of all the parent involvement we have in LPS. So I want to say thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, and thank you to your entire team.
Thank you.
Did you have anyone you wanted to recognize that was here that helped you put any of this
I
together?
think you've already introduced
Okay.
everybody.
Perfect. I just want to make sure I didn't leave anybody out.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Nola.
Mhm.
The next item is there anyone who would like to testify on the CLC agenda items? Seeing none, we will move on. The next item, Dr. Matt Larson from Lincoln Public Schools and Denise Pierce with Lincoln Parks and Recreation will come and talk about the levels of service with our CLC program and with this SSK, Safe and Successful Kids.
Okay, so several of you were here a couple years ago when we revised the interlocal agreement, and we removed the budgeting provisions from the interlocal agreement and indicated that extend we would focus on more the big picture levels in terms of the levels of service in each of the 3 programmatic areas that are spelled out in the interlocal agreement. Madam Chair mentioned these at the beginning, but it's the mental health, the preventive programming that we heard about last August. It's the protective programming, the school resource officers that we heard about back in November, got that very comprehensive report, and then also CLCs, the proactive programming that Nola talked a little bit about today. City and LPS staff had very general discussions about levels of services in these areas as we are all working on the upcoming budget. At least at this point, we don't anticipate any significant changes in those levels of service. What does that mean? At least on the city side, at this point, we believe that those 6 SROs will continue in our middle schools, the 8 in our high schools, and then also the threat assessment officer would continue. On the CLC side then, Parks and Rec anticipate that we'll continue to be the lead agency or the core service provider at those 5 schools that we're currently serving, and then also continue to provide those grants, which I believe go to Pershing, Mickle, and Park. On the LPS side then,
on our side, with respect to behavioral health, it's our intention to provide a similar level of contracted services for students next year as we did this year. As you're well aware, our community faces a challenge with having adequate personnel in the community to provide all of those hours, but it's our intent to do everything we can to leverage the number of hours that we have available to us and for our students. With respect to CLCs, we will continue with our 30 CLC sites, our 10 lead agencies, and our nearly 100 partners into the next year. We don't at this time anticipate an expansion of CLCs due in part to some restrictions on 21st century grant funding. However, as has been mentioned before, the school district has a new strategic plan, and through that effort, we'll take a close look at ways to sustain our programming and perhaps grow it. And before we take questions, I do just want to thank Nola for all of her leadership with respect to CLCs. You, in that brief period she presented, you've certainly heard her passion come through for the work that she does on behalf of our students and families. So thank you, Nola.
that's all we have for the formal presentation. Happy to answer any questions
Questions from
that board may
colleagues?
have.
Seeing none, thank you very much for your report. And with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you. The next meeting will be Thursday, September 26, 2024, and it will be in the Lincoln Public Schools District Office, probably in the boardroom. That focus will be on the annual mental health services. It is also the board's annual meeting where officers are elected. We're adjourned.